All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Mo Football, where we talk grassroots soccer all the way to the pros and all in between. And today we have a good friend of mine, we'll say from a very distance, even though he came to St. Louis and never came to say hi, but that's a whole another discussion. But he has gone play professional, has had helped develop, and also had connections to Oakland, the West Coast, and the MLS. So we have Benno here, Nagel, to talk
Nagel.
about. There you go. All right,
Yeah.
that's the French guy in me. So,
Hey, it's all good. It's probably Nagel if you think about the Germans that
but
once had it.
yes, well, I have bad. It's they torture me a lot in soccer, so I guess we'll keep it the French way.
No worries, all good.
Excellent. So yeah, so we know who you had one of your team in the MLS Next Pro, but that is way going into the future. So could you tell us a little bit about who Benoit is and how did you first get introduced to soccer?
Yeah. I think my first introduction to soccer, geez, I must have been maybe 6, 7 years old. Kind of get to be the poster child of why we should get the kids playing the game earlier. But I found my way in just very recreationally. I think a couple of my school friends were signing up to play. This is back in the day with the reversible uniforms and
Nice.
very grassroots. Parents coaching and so it wasn't. It's something I fell in love with in the sense that who wouldn't love playing soccer, but I wouldn't even really say I became a full-time soccer athlete until maybe 16.
Yeah.
Played basketball growing up, played football, never played organized baseball. Played lacrosse in high school. I think soccer was maybe lacrosse was my best sport, but I kind of fixed in on it 16, 17, and then wound up, playing in college and playing beyond that a little bit. And definitely now I can say that, soccer is my one true love, but it took a little bit to kind of get to that point. And yeah, I mean, who I am is a pretty loaded question. So hopefully over the course of this discussion we can get into that a little bit. But um, someone that loves, my family, loves my community. I really enjoy growing soccer in this country. I think that's for sure become my life's work, if you will. And just grateful for opportunities to connect with good people such as yourself and talk about all the good and all the bad and all the things that we can do better. And I think that's the fun part about growing soccer in America is that, you can list the criticisms and you can talk about all the things that need to be different. At the same time, if you're willing to, put your head down and work hard and be ambitious and try things and be bold, that you have an opportunity to really make an impact and, still kind of a, relative blank canvas. Whereas if you go to other parts of the world, to even touch it in the wrong way is like sacrilegious and it's just a different climate in some of those places. So to not have the burden of 150 years, although soccer's obviously been around for a really long time in the U.S., that excites me to be able to create. And so, anyways, that's just a quick summary about myself.
Absolutely. And yes, I think it's almost one of the blank canvas. Even though we know there's some clubs here that probably are older than some European soccer teams. So it's definitely one. What I found out that a lot of the soccer teams here are even older than PSG, which is my team growing up in France, which is quite interesting. But kind of bring it all the way back to like your youth. Yes, that you kind of played it with your friends. Was there any family members or any, the cultural part of soccer that you kind of indulge yourself growing up?
Yeah, I mean, my dad wasn't a soccer athlete; he was a wrestler. And so yeah, I think recognized multi-sport. So what we would do, and my dad's my biggest role model and kind of my mentor in many ways. And so he would take me down to the park, and he'd take my younger brother as well. And we'd have a football, we'd have a baseball glove and a baseball, we'd have a soccer ball. We would just kind of do a little bit of everything. I think again, like somebody that was really inspired. I'm sure growing up where you grew up, right, there were so many things you could look to and kind of model in terms of like what's a soccer player, what's soccer, what does the pathway to the top look like. I had like none of that, so I would say that even within college, um, the coaching wasn't amazing if I think about it in relation to how I would view it now with like somewhat of an education. There weren't even a lot of guys in my college program that I would say were like die hard, all in on soccer. Maybe when I finally progressed to play with El Farolito as, like a 24, 25-year old, 26-year-old, I could really say that was like the first time in my whole career, which is kind of where I ended, everything, being in a true kind of culture where you could look at guys that had played, some of them at a very high level. Um, but yeah, I would definitely say I was a bit starved for like an actual education in the sport. It was just me kind of figuring it out and my dad trying to help, and you get some decent coaches along the way, you get a lot of bad ones. And the game kind of teaches you as you go, and then every time you go to a higher level, I was a very good athlete. Um, then you have to kind of quickly adjust to the level based on not just being an athlete but being a footballer,
Right.
and so I kind of had to figure out ways to level up and then also just be able to rely on, athleticism and strength and some of the things I don't have anymore.
Hey,
but,
yeah.
but
Well,
some of the things that I had when I was younger, so that was
well,
kind
you
of
lose some and you gain some, so right. So I'm sure there's things that have replaced all of our stamina that we've lost from a very long time. And you touched a great point where that you really have a reference, just because of the maybe how soccer was growing up. Um, what would you say is like one thing that you will recommend the kids now that now they have access to everything when it comes to use as a reference? What would you be one of your recommendations to the next 8 or 9 year old that says, "No, I'm getting to soccer"?
yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of like the pendulum swing a little bit, right? Like things go from extremes to extremes. So if you would have looked at football when I was a kid, soccer when I was a kid, you know, very grassroots. There were competitive programs, very few clubs that would have been like, what you see today. In fact, probably no clubs, and I was born in 87, right? So when I was 8 years old, talking mid 90s, you fast forward to today, there's a million clubs, a million levels, a million people making $1 million. There's just all these other things. And so I think for the young kids, it's tremendous that they have the structure that they have. And they have the ability to play a lot of games and get a lot of exposure to different things and have a club that can provide, you know, week in, week out training, can provide clinics and supplemental training that has, all the camps that they offer, all the individual training that they offer. But I think I fear for kids now that it's become too structured too early. And not to say structured like in a way where there's like a plan. Like, yes, it's great that there's now people working within a long-term vision of athlete development, but you go to the field and you see 8, 9-year-old kids play, and it's to me it's too structured, and not that that's a bad thing, but I think it creates an environment where kids, if they're not playing, if they don't have, let's say that you're like a kid like me, right? Where like I wasn't getting additional exposure to it at home. I'm just like a normal American kid. If that's my only touch point, I think it gets too structured. There's too much coaching, too much information given to the kids, and it can kind of make it where it's not a fun place to be for a longer period. If you have a kid who's getting exposure to the game at home and being able to watch with family and, go and play soccer on their own, then I think maybe it's less of an issue. So I would say, just for parents to remember sometimes less is more. I think that's a key thing. Um, and then just for them to find ways to make it enjoyable, where the kid's going to want to love the ball, the kid's going to want to love playing the sport, and be in an environment where they can try things and take risks. And everyone talks about the joystick coaching,
Yeah,
um, and those are all real things. And it's not to say that authoritarian systems can be very effective, right? So, but what's the balance of certain things to have structure and have demands, but also to allow for kids to really enjoy. So that would be my message to families is like, figure out why it is your kid loves this to begin with,
Right.
and then try to find ways to maintain that love and let that grow despite the craziness of youth soccer and all the stuff that can help it but can also hurt it if you're not kind of aware of what those impacts can be.
Absolutely. And I think that's a lot of, I guess, us parents that are from the diaspora, which is kind of from overseas, where I think the biggest part that still miss to this day is that we're country is so spread out that even your neighborhood, it's not really a neighborhood, it's kind of a long street of houses where you don't really have a whole bunch of kids playing soccer together with no adults. Because I think that's where a lot of the skillful players, you see it kind of express themselves because it's less adult. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned,
Yeah.
uh, go
I
ahead.
was gonna, I was gonna say, like, just on that really quick, like there's also, where does coaching become impactful? I always remember when I was living in Croatia, the guy that was at the time the technical director for the Croatian Football Federation, Romeo Jozak, he would have this comment he would make where it's like, yeah, you can let the kid play in the street. You can play in the street for all the thousands and thousands of hours, and it's going to give you a lot of benefits. At the same time, it can be a place where you can form some really bad habits.
Right.
And so as a coach, you can let that go and like just take what it gives you, which if you look historically gives you a lot of great footballers, like obviously. But then how do you then find interventions within that where you still have that open play and unstructured play and risk taking and all the things that that pickup environment would give you. But then how do you make that intervention to then help that guy to, find better ways? And I think again, it's just that balance. I think you can still have all the structure, but how do you have that kind of thinking outside the box type culture that can be created? And then yeah, like you said, people just copy and pasting, like, oh, I saw them do this thing on YouTube, and I took all these notes, and now I'm gonna come here and make my under 9 girls third team, do this thing that I saw from Barcelona on the weekend,
Yeah.
and also for people to just kind of,
Yeah.
but also let the coach find their journey, right? Because
Right.
that's how you improve coaches. And so it's messy, as is a lot of stuff in life.
Oh, yes. And I think we almost give a from tactical manager one credits. I think you mentioned Palmares. I think there's a one day where all of the kids from their academy actually plays freely with the coaches just overlooking at them playing, but just no interaction. So um, just I always use that example because Tack. So we have to give him a little credit
Yeah, for
on
sure.
that. I'm sure he will like that part.
Yeah.
So when it comes to youth development, if you had to scratch one thing that's being maybe overused in US soccer, what would that be?
Development, the philosophy of development.
Okay.
I think that again, yes, you don't. I just was highlighting, like, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, younger kids, the winning versus development conversation. But I feel like there's a whole generation of coaches and educators that now hide behind this development framework, and it creates an environment that's kind of lacking accountability for the players and for the coach and for the club to be able to say, well, at what point does development stop and does results matter? And results can be multifaceted. Can be the team result, can be the individual player result, can be the result from that game. You have to have a definition for what you're defining, measurables to benchmark success. But I do feel that this idea of development for development's sake, I'll always remember this, like 12 years ago, I was working in a club, California Odyssey, and my two really good friends were working there. One of them is now the sporting director, technical director for Toulouse in
Nice.
France. But at this point, we were like in like Cal Odyssey in Fresno. And my other friend that was the director that my buddy and I were working under is an assistant coach in the USL Championship, and has a very long background in a number of clubs. And we were being visited by the guy that at the time, and I won't say his name. I think he was like the U15 national team head coach, youth national
Okay.
team head coach. And this is when US Soccer was still running the academy program. And so he was just out there doing a club evaluation as part of like the ongoing club, membership status and staying in good standing and just giving feedback to the clubs. And, he, after the session, was talking with us and he was sharing an experience of, I think it was the U15 national team that had been over in Serbia and had been playing some games. And, he was very proudly stating to us that even though they lost 6-1, or some big number, that they continued to try to play from the back. We kept playing, and it's like, okay, well, at a certain point, can you just bypass can you just play into the midfield? Can you play into the 9? Can you find a diagonal ball to a winger and then maybe somebody can get around him or support him? And, not to say that it's, playing through the thirds can be tremendous, but if you're down 1-0 and down 2-0 and giving up turnovers that lead to goals, does that become counterproductive to, the objective of like, winning, right? Or even just like not getting killed in a game, which, can have other, consequences. And so if I think back to that moment and then you kind of layer in some of like the tiki taka generation where it's like, just move the ball, move the ball, move. It's like, move the ball where? Like
Lateral move, yes.
what is the objective of like we're trying progressive ball possession, right? We're trying to go from here to their goal. And so I feel that there's been probably for the last decade or more, not to say that generation of Barcelona killed football, but when you get this very much copy and paste type thing, and then you start layering in this kind of development framework, it's like, okay, well, what's the aim? What are we trying to achieve? And then does winning not factor into that? And I think again, not to go on the other side and say, well, let's just be cutthroat and tell all these 7-year-old kids that they suck and just like play long ball and like you see those things in like little kid basketball, right? Where like get the ball to the big kid under the hoop and and like that's just what you do, right? It's like you don't want that. But also if we're talking development, if that big kid has maybe got the highest potential to be a really, really talented player, and I know you get like early matures and biological age and chronological age are different, but it's like maybe getting that kid the ball a lot's going to actually work out okay for the country if that one kid in all these different environments become better, right? And they actually have an ability to play at that top level, so there's probably no right or wrong, but I would for sure say that there needs to be a reframing of what does development require and where does winning and results factor into development, because certainly at like U16 you can't be talking about moral victories at that point,
No,
and there's a
especially
lot of
not these
people that
days.
still do that. There's a lot of people that I feel still are like hiding behind this concept of development, or then what they'll say is, oh well, we're developing people off the field and on the field, and it's about the human development. And again, like you can look in France, right? There are these stories of kids getting brought into the academies and getting discarded and winding up homeless, and certainly like helping the kids in their life for the majority of them is probably more important than just helping them as an athlete. Even for the top players, you still want to help them to be well-rounded and to be able to deal with their pathway. But I just, not to go too deep on it, I just really feel that there's a lot of shitty coaches that hide behind this development philosophy, and the more we can weed those people out and or give them or hold them, find ways to hold the mirror up to them so that they can self-correct, I think it would better service the country in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And I think the playing in the back, I think sometimes it morally may also kind of hit the kids more. Because like you mentioned, right, 6-1, but they keep trying the same thing. At the end of the day, maybe more, in their head, it might play negatively because, I mean, it was still a 6-1 loss.
Yeah.
And
or find ways to
yes,
do, like if you you know, let's say you want to build from the back, to have a little bit of like variation in your
right,
approach. Maybe I spend, again, all dependent on the level, so
yes,
like certain ages, different things. But even like U9s, I'll always remember this. I was in a director of coaching course in NorCal, and we had a guy named Franz Hoek that's, a very accomplished coach, has been done a lot of stuff, worked with Louis van Gaal for a long, long time, Man United, Dutch national team, Ajax, Barca, all these places. And one of the for the course, it was like a year-long course, so we had to go through very comprehensive stuff. It was tremendous for my formation. I was maybe 26 at the time, and so we had assignments and people had to present. And Franz is like, doesn't hold anything back. He'll cut you down, which is great. I love that. And so here's this guy who was presenting his club, and he had a video of his U9s or U10s, and he was talking about their style of play, and how the style of play leads to the development demands of the players and the coaches, with core competencies that you have to be able to achieve to fit this style, and
yeah,
how you integrate all of that into your environment. And this guy shows this clip of his, I think it was his U9s. They like knocked the ball like 26 times from the goalkeeper to the left back to the center back to the right back to the midfielder back around, all these passes, two touches, really clean, looked really great. Finally got the ball forward. I don't even know if they finished or whatever that was, but it was really impressive. I mean, this was him relating to their style of play. And Franz goes, "Hey, that's great. Um, but in that whole sequence of passes, I never saw in one moment a player try to initiate a 1v1.
no,
And
good
so
point. Yeah,
if this kid's 8 years old and he's receiving and passing, he can probably learn that. Not that you say that you don't want to teach that, but you can also learn that more later. If you're now having 8-year-old kids only think to receive and find the open player, and now your fullback is becoming, like more of a, like kind of certain parameters, like, oh, if you can't go forward, play around, right?
yes,
What
just
about teaching the kids to receive the ball and he's just 1v1? Just make a little feint, make a little move, try to get by him, especially in those areas. If you're not encouraging that, then what happens to that kid? And maybe that outside back, maybe he becomes a winger later in his career. Maybe he plays someplace else. Now that player is going to be limited because
sit
they
down
were
one
just told
position.
to, like, oh, if you can't play forward, play around. Well, if the kid's 3 feet away from you at that age, 5 feet away from you, even 2 feet away from you, there's ways to get by them. You make a
Right.
body feint as the ball travels, you push the ball past them, you can run past them, you know, you can make a little move. And I just always remember it was like a whole room of people, right? And this guy's like giving his, like, this is my club, and he just killed him with that, I've always thought about that and like, how do you define success? And I think that's where we're still in this kind of like gray area of like, what is development, and I think it shows if it's unclear to me and unclear to you and unclear to people here, and then you think about the scale of our country, how
There's
much.
a lot of confused kids. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
right, like how do you just add that up, there's literally like probably like 100,000 kids that couldn't answer that question, and so I think that's, not that I have the answer, but I think that's an area to kind of talk about, try to figure out a better approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's good to have some of those presentations with experienced coaches, so you can take that away and not be so caught up in those silos. And I think I did see, I believe it's U.S. Soccer kind of meeting with the French national team and going to Clairefontaine to kind of learn maybe some of the things of why France is doing so well. So hopefully they will be able to take some of that learning and maybe produce the next pros. But and I think also in one of the discussions that we've had before, you've also mentioned the whole about private and supplemental training, and we've seen a lot of discussions about that as well. So, what is your take on that side of the business? Because I think it's more business than anything else.
It is a business. Like, I have friends that are doing, Friday afternoon sessions, $50 a head, 20 kids for a 1 hour training. you can do the math right there. If they're out there for 2, 3 sessions in a row, 3 different age groups, they're making like 3 grand in an afternoon. And it's awesome for them. Like some of these guys are cleaning a lot of money. Um, but then like, and then the training's actually not bad. I think it's a byproduct of the kind of incompetency that you see in a lot of club soccer, and not even just incompetency, but just some of the structural limitations of team environments where, you've got one coach, no assistant coaches. That youth coach is like warming the players up, putting them through all the different activities within the progression of what they're training that day, putting down the cones, picking up the cone. I mean, you work in this space,
Oh
right?
yes.
So it becomes very hard within that environment to then give individualized coaching to all the different players, let alone just repetitions in their position and in their kind of situational reality of like, hey, I'm this position, that position, or whatever it is, individualized coaching. And so I think the supplemental stuff has really been born out of higher level parents recognizing that and these guys selling that as well. And, certainly like, in top academies, they have individual training that they do.
Right.
Especially for the top prospects in the age group, not like that all the guys get it the same way, but um, so it's like it's a thing, right? Like it does exist. Individualized training is a thing, even if you're in PSG's academy.
Oh,
Here, it's just I mean, again, I got friends that are making $400,000, and that includes other stuff. They do camps, they'll do trips, they'll take kids overseas, they'll make markup on that. Um, but now I'm hearing stuff where like elite level players, because it's kind of more catered towards the elite level kids or the kids in the middle that are trying to level up.
right.
You know, and for the elite level, I'm hearing about kids that are waking up now and doing training sessions at 6 in the morning.
That
It's like,
sounds like
it's
what we have in France. We call the Project Mbappe, where I think there's that notion of over-personalized training on top of your training to build the next Mbappe.
yeah, and again, it's not a bad thing. You go back
Yes.
100 years, there'd be 6-year-old kids working in the mines. Like there still are today, right? There's kids doing manual labor in other parts of the world, and that's fine. And these kids here have, they can go to Whole Foods and get whatever nutrition they need. They can, there's a lot of stuff to support that, right? But I'd probably criticize them being
Okay.
in school
No,
for 8 hours,
and I think
sitting.
it's probably just grew out of a need because of maybe there's not enough time in the day in the structure of their clubs to be able to
Yeah,
produce, I guess, the extra touches, what the 10,000 touches we always talk about. So it's kind of here a need, but
yeah, it's just because some of these
also
guys and some of these guys are friends of mine. They're they're not bad people. They're not like, and again, I'm just speaking to the reality that I'm aware of, right? I'm sure there's a lot of trainers doing horrible things and being, everyone's different. It's a big world. Um, but we talk about 10,000 touches and it's like, okay, is that just in a vacuum, 10,000 touches, or touches with what purpose? What's the point of like, what are you doing to train? I think it goes back to the less is more
yes,
philosophy. Um, I've seen stuff. I'll give you a good example. There's a group here in the Bay Area. They're making, millions of dollars a year total across a lot of different things they do. I've seen them on Instagram do this exercise where there's an attacking player and a defending player, and the attacking player has the ball and they're dribbling in a straight line, maybe like 10 yards, and the defending player is trailing them. The attacker has to get around a cone, turn 180 degrees, and then go 1 versus 1 against that defender. And they have the option of going to a goal to the left or going to a goal to the right. And this is being sold as a 1v1 drill. And it's like, okay, go watch like 20,000 hours of football and show me a place where a attacker is going to have the ball, going to dribble 10 yards straight and then do a 180 and then come back and then try to find the solution to go to score either way, right? So
you'll
the
have about
situation,
6 players on top of you before you get
yeah,
there.
you just wouldn't, dribbling straight, turning around, coming back the way that you came from, it just I don't see it, right? So you could then say, well, is that a sprinting exercise? Is that what the objective is? To like go and go as fast as you can to the cone, and you're making it realistic with the ball and the defender,
Right.
and maybe that's the objective. Is it something else, right? But I feel like a lot of these guys, they're trainers, they're not coaches,
Yeah,
but they're
it
athletes,
sounds
right?
almost like a drill for a center back almost.
Yeah, I mean,
When you lose the ball back, turn around and then have to face the the forward that's pressing you back after you try to pick it up from back or goal. But I wouldn't really think that for a attacking player to do that.
or just in general, again, like, so just that as an example, like, what's the context? What are we trying to improve, right?
Yeah,
Because like that's what ultimately individual training everywhere else is. It's very customized to that kid to
right.
try to identify their strengths and weaknesses for a high potential player and help them either get better at what they're not good at or get better at what they're good at to help them progress. Here it just seems to be this collection of activities that they then replicate for all the kids that they cycle through the same thing, because they're just trying to go for volume to get kids through the door, because every kid is, $50, $40, whatever. And so it actually ends up being sold as this individualized training, but it's very generic and oftentimes not appropriately applied. And then, again, this idea of like waking up at, training at 6 in the morning before they go to school. I see kids that will play a game on a Saturday and do a private training on a Sunday. It's like, okay,
That's
well, they should probably be recovering
mm,
on Sunday, or maybe doing something less structured. Go play soccer, tennis, go to the park and, kick the ball around for fun with your friends. So just the places in which it pops up in the schedule of the week, it's in in my view, kind of counterproductive. And then you get these guys where they're not coaches. So like even from the conditional element, if you're doing a bunch of circuit training, dribbling the ball or whatever the passing organization is, these guys often have very little education from like a work to rest ratio.
okay.
And so they wind up taking this skill development session and converting it into really like a very challenging conditioning session, and oftentimes not giving information to the player, because again, now they're not even really doing a lot of 1v1. They're doing it in small groups because they can make more money per head, right? So it's now kind of becoming a team training again, where the same problems of giving individual information are there, right? So again, more power to them. They're entrepreneurs. They're making money. They're working hard. They got to go do it. You can have 20
That's
trainings in a
long
week.
hours. Yeah.
You got to go put the work in. You're in the elements. So it's not like I respect what they're doing. If we're talking about like, how do we bridge the gap as a country and get better? And you look at all the resources that the Federation and the MLS, all these leagues are putting into education, none of that's going towards the private training environment. And a lot of these guys are very contrarian, very individualistic. There's a reason that they don't work in the clubs. They maybe don't get along, whatever. They just don't want to have their weekends jammed up. And so you have this whole subset of where the actual training is happening, the individual training with the top players, where it's now being done by a completely unsupervised, not to say it's got to be regulated, but it's like pirate stuff
So
on the
it's not
side.
really a connection of like a group of people helping develop a kid. It's more silos giving maybe conflicting ways
Oh,
of training and
big time,
others.
and contradicting what the coach says, and it's often a place where the families can vent to the trainer about all the problems they're
Fair.
having in their club, and then the trainer kind of feeds into that, because the more frustrated they are with their club, the more they're going to sign up for their programs, and then you have that trainer saying, "Well, you should leave this club, you should go to that club," and they
Yeah,
kind of become intermediaries, and so again, it's life. It's in the aggregate, it's probably a good thing that that exists,
right.
but it's like, how do we make that better? And again, you look at all this work that's being done on the education side and the formatting side and all the rules and competition and all the things that are trying to make this, a developmental environment to, in the sense of progressing athletes. And then you have to then acknowledge that there's being a lot of hours every week spent by these very athletes who are trying to improve
Yes.
by coaches that are not even in the system at all. They're making $400,000 a year on Venmo. Right?
I mean, the wrong business. It sounds like
it's like you got to move out to the Bay Area, but
yes,
like it's just there's no, and so it's again not life is life, right? It just
yes,
is, right? But I think that's a question I ask myself is like, how do you impact that space, or how do you provide a better option in that space where you can still make the money because that's just what it is.
yeah. So,
Um,
gotta eat.
but
Yes,
do better, do
yes.
better than the other people. So
Okay. So yes, so that part. So now seeing where we are now with the development of soccer just in general and the byproduct that we now see. Um, what is the progress that you see in today's time? Because from what I've seen from soccer 20 years when I moved here to now has seen a huge jump in the skill levels. So what is the few things that you are seeing now that makes you excited about what soccer will be in this country?
I think the exposure to, you know, not just the highest levels, but of course the highest levels, but the overall exposure to the game that kids have. A lot of that's through media, of course, right? You've got cell phones, tablets, laptops, streaming services, the video games. Like there's so many touch points for young kids to, um, even in clips, see the highest stuff. It probably creates some bad habits because most of the stuff they're watching are all these tricks and flicks and different things. Um, so that actually may be a problem if you actually break that down, versus a kid learning the discipline to watch a full game, when they're like 9 years old, to then realize that those individual moments, if you get them right or get them wrong, can have a big impact on the outcome of the match, right? Now it's just very much like, oh, I saw this video of this guy getting nutmegged, and it's like, yeah, but then he lost the ball right after,
Yeah, you missed
so
that part. Yes.
yeah, so there's that, but I think the exposure that kids are having at an earlier age is tremendous. I think especially for kids where I mean, all of us, but the windows of trainability, right? Where like kids can see something and then learn it by seeing it. So I think to have that earlier is massive because I think ultimately it's the imagination of a kid to wrap their mind around like, wow, that's cool. I want to do that. Let me figure that out. And then to have multiple touch points from their team training to their their individual training to the video games that they play online to the clips that they watch online to being able to go see more and more games in person. um it's crazy how much it's advanced, from like you're saying 20 years ago to today. um
They have it
and what will
good.
it look like in the future? They got it really good, man. They got it really good. I think even like the cleats, there's like a million soccer cleats and crazy prices and all this stuff.
Oh,
um yeah, I think optionality is great, and the exposure is really really impressive. Um, if U.S. soccer doesn't do anything in the next 5 years, they just got to fire everybody because there's no excuses anymore,
well,
right? Like
yeah.
it's the same stuff.
After this year, if there's no movement, yeah,
Oh my
it's a
God,
clean house.
it's just
And
that
I think
impressive.
everybody will be saying this the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Um, and so yeah, so when it comes and kids is lucky now because I think when we first moved it, we only had Fox Sport, which you had to pay for, and it was very limited. So yes, kids have it extremely well now. And the part that you mentioned about kids watching an entire game, I feel it because I have my son here, even though play club soccer high level, practice 3 times a week. If you go to tell them to go watch a full 90, it's like you're trying to pull teeth out of them. I was like, well, you know, that one clip is just 5 seconds.
yeah. Uh,
And that nutmeg probably got him or her got leveled 10 seconds later because of that nutmeg. So you missed the entire part of it. So,
yeah,
but I guess it's one of those fun things where they have it good now, but also at the same time they have now access to all of the things that you and I grew up watching and kind of let them know who Ronaldinho is, right? Because they only know Messi and Ronaldo. That's the first thing that comes to their mind.
Yeah.
Now it's good to see them being able to name other players that not only these two guys.
Yeah, I mean it's tremendous, right? And the growth of professional soccer at the lower levels and what USL's done and what they're creating with MLS Next Pro and all the stuff that's actually bringing it to local communities in a different way, presented in a professional manner. It just creates that pipeline of how do you ignite the mental ignition, right? Like how do you get this kid to say, I'm going to do that. Um, and so I think it's really good. But at the same time, like not watching a full game and then being able to recognize like, wow, I watched this game with my dad or my mom or whomever, and yeah, this team had all the possession and they had a bunch of chances, but they couldn't capitalize, and then they like one counterattack and they lost, you know,
Yep.
right, and like being able to like that's actually the takeaway, right? Like finish your chances, and if you don't, you leave yourself open to be punished, especially in transition and later in games. And so I think, if the kid is then just seeing those 5-second clips of that same game where he's watching his team knock the ball around and do all this stuff, but then missing the lesson of like, yeah, but they lost 1-0 because they were careless with their final third opportunities and then, had a moment of, lack of concentration or whatever, and then got punished and that was it, right? Or they scored on a set piece or something against the run of play and whatever, right? So I think that's probably a kind of, now that we talk about it, like real, like, man, maybe that's not a good thing.
Hey,
Maybe they don't got it good or they got it too good to not to be ignorant to that, right?
I'm trying to get them to watch 90 minutes in stadium. Of course, they're forced to, but just watching it is still a struggle. But Eli, when you watch this, you heard Dad say it. So yes, now the whole world knows it.
And live too.
Yeah, so he cannot hide about it anymore, and probably his coach will know it too. But digress on that part. So yeah, so and now talking about your experience, because you've not just played, youth soccer, you've also had your run at professional soccer. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience, playing in the US and then playing overseas and then come back to the US?
Yeah, so I never played overseas. I played in the US and even, it wouldn't be what you'd say professional, kind of what would have maybe now been the third tier, where, people were paid, but not, it wasn't like a full-time living, you get the
And
cash in the white envelope and,
you got paid, you're a pro.
and not a lot. And so I think, yeah, I mean, like today, I mean, even less so with the playing component, but more just my background, as a coach. I had an opportunity. I spent some time in FC Twente in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And then I spent some time also in Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia in the youth academy. And that was amazing. I mean, the level was unreal. I think at that time, it's probably still similar today, but maybe like 75% of the Croatian youth national team players were Dinamo players. And I was with the 98 born generation. So they were U16s when I was there. And we had, amazing talent. Or sorry, the 99s. The 98s at that time, I think, were one of the top teams, I think, in all of Europe. I think they won the Nike Cup in Manchester. And so it was just amazing to see that, that level and the culture behind it. We go back to like kind of the development framework. And again, I don't know if it's true today, but in Dinamo, you would see like 50% attrition from year to year.
Okay.
And, from like U8 to U12, they would just recruit from Zagreb, which is like 1 million people. Croatia's only 4 million, so it's a lot of people in Zagreb. But then at like U12 or U13, they'd start recruiting from the whole country. And then at, U15, U16, they'd start recruiting from, the other states, former Yugoslavia. This is right when they started joining the European Union. So now it's probably even changed in terms of not just being able to bring players in, but also players from Dinamo being recruited earlier to leave, right? Because they have that pathway now with the ability to move. Um, And, you know, so by the time the kid gets to like U17, if you're still there from U8, you've seen a bunch of people get dropped. You've probably seen all your close friends get cut. You become hardened by that environment, let alone just the actual training and skill acquisition and all that stuff. But just from the business side of it, you realize that it's not promised tomorrow and what you have to do to fight for your spot. Um, you know, and again, I don't know the how it relates today. It's been a while since coaching has been my main focus, but there used to be a conversation me and a couple of my friends would have where it's like if you look at the U20 national team, the US national team, let's say 10 years ago, and you take those U20s and then you look at them 10 years later or 5 years later, what percentage of those guys were playing in MLS, the first division of our country? A lot of them, high percentage. If you go to like Greece or you go to wherever, Italy, France, and you look at the U20 national team of France 10 years ago, and then you go see which of those guys are still playing in the first division, not a lot of them, maybe a couple, and maybe a couple of those guys are like world class players, but you know the kind of pedestal effect that you get for some of these top players in the US, where they're the best kid in their club from U8 to U17, and like there's a big gap between them and the other ones. It
Right.
was really interesting to see that being overseas. Um, you know, and you know, relating to professional environment here, like obviously, you know, I was with the Oakland Roots and founded that project. Obviously, other people were involved as well, but that was really my idea that I brought to life. And you know, a bunch of people came along on that journey, and they're still on that journey, trying to grow soccer in Oakland. And you know what I've done with the Town FC, although it hasn't been our team. You know, it's through the partnership with the Quakes,
Yeah.
but I've been able to watch a lot of games, obviously, over the last 10 years. Um, and I think it's improving. I think overall, you know, things are growing here. The resources being invested is insane in
Oh,
a good
yes.
way and a bad way. Um, you know, so it's on the up and up. I think at the same time, there has to be a real assessment about like even for the pro level, like what are we doing here? Is this like a stadium development project? Is this like a housing mixed use project? Is this a football? Is this a football project? Is this a social impact project? Is this a brand building project? Like, what is it that we're all here to do?
That is a
Uh,
loaded question.
that's a lot, right? And you know, so it's again, it's just life. It
Yeah.
is. It's chaotic and imperfect, and at the same time amazing. Um, and yeah, I miss like yeah, I remember when I was on my coaching journey, you know, you'd like run into some random person like, oh, what is it that you're doing? Oh, I'm coaching. Oh, yeah, but what's your real job? You know? And I think we've kind of moved past that in some ways. It's like accepted now. Um, you know, but I remember, you know, remember being in Croatia, and, you know, there'd be double trainings because the kids were in different, like in Croatia, half the kids go to school in the morning, half the kids go to school in the afternoon.
Yep.
So there'd be two trainings in the day, you know, with the two groups, and then there'd be 1 or 2 days a week where they'd train in the evening together. And so, like, if you had a morning session and then you got an afternoon session, depending on where you lived, you weren't necessarily going to go home in between, you know. And sometimes you change, shower, change clothes, whatever. But sometimes you just stay in your coaching gear and you'd go find something to do, like you'd go to a cafe or you'd go to the mall or whatever. And you know, I was younger, right? So like I'd be walking around with a couple buddies wearing the Dinamo stuff,
Right.
and maybe they would think that I was like a player or something like that, which I wasn't. But even as a coach, you know, you could see the respect that was assigned to somebody that was associated with the club. Um, and there's a lot of you know fans that weren't always happy with that club and whatever. But even when I was in the Netherlands with FC Twente, you know, you could see the respect and the recognition and the importance that was given. And so if you can then again apply that to like a U13 player playing in that club and all the pride and social impact that they get from that recognition and how that fuels their motivation. Um, you know, I would see kids here in the US again years ago, but I had a couple kids that were really talented players that wound up quitting soccer to go become field goal kickers because they could go make the varsity team as a freshman and get the Letterman jacket and be in that environment where there's a couple thousand people watching them on a Friday night. Um, and it was purely, it wasn't like they loved kicking footballs. It was like literally they saw recognition and value out of that, right? And then of course college recruiting and all that stuff. So not that that was like shame on them for doing it, but there wasn't a cultural appeal to be like, I'm going to go be a footballer. So I think that's changing now, where kids younger are saying, no, I'm going to go play for. I'm not even going to go play for Real Madrid. I'm going to go play for St. Louis City, and then go to
Smart kid.
Real, then go to
Yes.
Real Madrid later. Right?
Hey,
So like
wow.
they can see
Sounds
that.
like there's a St. Louis kid that's dreaming now. That's like, hey, you know what? This is feasible, which is because
It is. Yeah,
but
yeah, it is.
yes,
It is,
and
and it's a good thing. That's a good thing.
yes,
So I think in the aggregate, if we look at like again the million things that could be better, should be better, need to be better, that more kids in their local community can say, "Hey, I'm gonna go play for Chattanooga FC, and then I'm gonna go play for Barcelona, or I'm gonna go play for Charleston Battery, and then I'm gonna go play for Barcelona, or I'm gonna go play for my USL 2 squad. I'm gonna go, whatever that is, whatever's most in front of them in their local environment, to have organizations and investors and operators that are putting their money and their time and their passion into creating that and giving it a presentation that creates a professional feel, and what that can do to the inspiration factor for young kids and coaches,
right.
right, that like want to be a part of that level. Like I think that's a plus. Can only be a plus.
Yes, it sometimes it has to be ugly, but it has to be part of the process. And you mentioned that you've going from playing soccer to coaching, and then you kind of turned it to more into the business side of the sport. And you mentioned first Oakland, and also we know the Town FC. So, could you tell us a little bit of how that transition was like, and was there a moment that you was like, you know what, let's hang my soccer cleats, let's hang my coaching hat, and let's get into this the business of soccer.
Yeah, the playing stuff, my body just broke down, and I just couldn't do it anymore. That was like probably like 26. And then coaching was awesome. Like I kind of had a group of friends and were very motivated to be at the highest levels, and they were all Europeans that come out here to play in college, and it stayed, and they've all gone on to do some really cool stuff. They're doing some really cool stuff at high levels of European football. I think in a lot of ways, like some of them would even give me shit for having like deviated from that path. I think I had a pretty good I had a pretty good ability to connect with players and communicate and bring energy and give a message. I wasn't a manager or a head coach. I was always like a supporting person, but I think I had value for that. We'll never know, or maybe we will if I go back to that. Um, but when I was overseas, I remember reading articles about Detroit City and Chattanooga when they had that like 18,000 person NPSL championship game. And even locally here in the Bay Area, there's a club, SF City, that had a pretty good run when they started. They're still they're still doing their thing, but there was a moment when they first kind of jumped off. They made the US Open Cup. So I was like seeing those things, and I love traveling and being around different cultures. At the same time, I love my country. I love my home. Like I'm like a homebody in some ways. Like I'll just hang local if I can. If you put me on a plane, I'll go. But like I'll also like just kind of kick it locally. And so I had these ideas about like, man, I should start a club. I actually in grad school had kind of authored like a big business plan on like a grassroots project, and kind of had that in my back pocket. And then when I was on my travels, just kind of thinking about it and seeing it and being like, man, this is interesting. And so when I moved back to Oakland, 2017 or something like that, um, Oakland was also kind of going through a bit of a renaissance at that moment, and it was kind of one of these like, man, I should kick tires on this and try to see what I can do. Um, I'd kind of established a pathway for myself with coaching, and you're kind of like waiting for the phone to ring for the next project to pop up, and your kind of bags packed wherever that's going to be. And so it's like, I'm going to put a couple months to this and see what happens. And 3 months led to 6 months, led to 12 months, led to this very grassroots kind of like organizing thing of just getting people connected and socializing the idea. And of course had, partners along the way. And in a lot of ways, it wasn't creating something, it was tapping into something that was already there and just providing the platform through the team and, the investors that came on board to, kind of help stand the club up. And so, yeah, I think that experience for me was like really transformative to kind of realize like, hey, if I just work at this thing for a while, like I can build something. And I think in retrospect, as an athlete, as a coach, you are kind of an entrepreneur
Right.
in a different way. And so once I kind of made that connection of like, yeah, I don't have an MBA, I got to learn what all this stuff is to make this work, and putting together financial plans and legal documents. And, you definitely make your mistakes the first time around with that. Um, Now it's comfortable to me,
Yes.
but it wasn't to begin with. And I still kind of like think back to some of those first games that we played at Laney College with the Roots, and even what I've seen with the town and the reception that we got. And you look around the country, like you think about like a Vermont Green, it just
Amazing.
blew up, right? It's there, right? So it's not even that you have to build it, you have to build your organization, but you have to find ways to tap into pre-existing communities that already have the love. Like you're not going to go and like take some random person and like inject passion for soccer within them. But it's how do you identify the people in your community that are already passionate for it? How do you bring them all together? Not that you got to merge them together. They still get to be their individual selves within their own little community. But, how do you bring them together, bring them to the table, and have a dialogue about what you want that team to look like in your community together? And then go out and, find a league and find the venue and, find the ultra high net worth person that wants to put that money to work in that way. And try not to go out of business. Try to
Well,
stay viable, because there's a lot of people losing a lot of money in pro soccer in the US right now and everywhere. It's some ways even worse globally. Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, once I kind of bottled that, and then it just kind of becomes, something you can replicate. I'm hooked. So it's been a great almost a decade now doing that
Nice.
stuff.
And for those of us, on the outside, it's always fantasizing the, building a club, right? Everybody only sees the end product and the nice hustle. So if there was one thing that you would tell someone that's thinking about running, what is that one hard lessons that you learned in that decade experience?
Contracts.
So find
uh,
someone, learn.
yeah, contracts. No, I mean, like, there's so many things. Like, you couldn't say one thing. Obviously, the legal side of it is key. Um, raising capital is key. And, I think also finding, for a team, right, you have to have an owner, not just an investor, right? Like, there's a difference. If somebody's like, oh, I'm going to give you $1 and you're going to make it into $2 in 2 years, it's like, no, it's probably not going to happen. This is going to be something that loses money for a period of time. And the skill set then becomes, how do you lose less money? And instead of losing $6 million a year, lose 3 million a year. But still, for the people to be eyes wide open, like, this is, you know, you're going to build the value of this company, and then hopefully find some stadium project and some real estate component that gives you a real asset other than the franchise and the intellectual property of the club. Um, yeah, just it takes a village in that regard. Like, you've got to have the capital component, you've got to have the venue. Oftentimes, the venue that you're going to start at is going to be something where you're a lease, you're a tenant, you're a leasee. So you got to have a really good agreement there to be able to have the dates that you need, and to sell alcohol and to do other things around parking and concessions that allow you to really get those economics to work in your favor. Um, and then how do you then like again figure out the development component of building a stadium? And you see now these projects that they're doing. It's amazing, right?
And
Um,
it's not just the stadium.
it's not. It's other elements that you're kind of creating an entertainment district. But that's a necessary thing, and I think, um, yeah. So it really takes a lot to make these things work, and um, all these clubs are losing money at the same time. Many of these owners have the ability to do that,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, how do you then make a plan that still allows them to feel that there's progress being made and doesn't make a club operate in such a way that it's not viable? Because that's, imagine if St. Louis City was like, sorry, we ran out of cash. It's been fun. you know?
Oh, that was just the last place that he chose another professional team.
Yeah,
I
but
can.
but you see the caliber of
Yes.
the owners, and that's less and
Yes.
less of a risk in
Yes.
some ways. So yeah, so it's there's a lot that goes into this stuff, and I would encourage, people with the interest to do it, to find a easy to start place. Like, one, you got to be crazy to do this stuff because it's fucking crazy. Um, but go organize a Sunday league team, or go organize a futsal team, or go do a indoor league on Thursday nights, and then go from there. Do that for a couple, like a year, and try to figure out who the local players are, and go join the league for clubs, or go join UPSL, or go join NPSL, or go join USL two. Right, that's a very premium level of kind of amateur soccer, and go do that, right? Which then all of a sudden you're talking about 25,000, 50,000, $100,000 a year that you got to figure out, maybe more for some, um, and then along the way, like, how do you go find a very wealthy individual or family or collective of people that want to then support that project? Sometimes if you can find that person to begin with, awesome. You save yourself a couple years of like having to build it out from the ground up. And there's not a right or wrong if you do it one way or the other way, but I would really encourage people to try and do it. It's like, it's worth a year or two of your life to see if you can make it work. Um, and yeah, it's, just make sure you square it with your wife or your partner or significant other, because it's definitely like it's a whole thing of support to allow you to really go try to do that. But it's super rewarding. And I think about all the games I've been a part of now, and, seeing fans in the stadium, and seeing little kids running around. And, my daughter, her first soccer game was a Town FC game. Right.
Nice.
So like there's certain things that like you can look at the economics and the math and the time, and probably find a lot of reasons to just be like, what the hell are you doing? But then you also see, the culture building of it, and you see kids having fun, and parents and families enjoying their time, and it, kind of makes it worth it, So I think for me, you see these people that, and everyone finds their life journey differently, but you see people that will, done their career, made their money, and then they get into ownership when they're kind of like retired. And I was like, man, like, I don't want to do these things when I'm like 60 years old.
Yeah.
Like, granted, I'm not the guy that can write the huge check to kickstart it, whereas some of those folks that have spent their life in their business have, made the means to be able to do that. Um, but I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do this while I'm young and enjoy it. And I'm not as young as I once was, but I'm still, still in my 30s and still grinding, and a lot of experience and a lot more motivation, to just do it better and just keep doing it at a higher level. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you've had your hand in two big clubs, so that's is a lot for a short time of experience.
I'm just waiting for you to invite me out to St. Louis to start a project somewhere.
Dude,
the hill, the hill,
invite you,
the hill FC. That would be what I would do. Get
man.
all the Italian guys down there, just so we could go out and eat there all the time, man.
Yeah.
That was my spot.
Well, since you bring it up, I was gonna keep that for the end of the show, but you have the hat on, so
The
yes,
best football sub ever.
you
Oh
were
my
here in
God.
St. Louis, so
I was.
wait, let's talk about this a little bit.
The restaurant. So across the street from this, there's right across the corner, there's a great Italian restaurant as well. But yeah, the meatball subs here were and the chocolate cookies were unbelievable. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna clip that and I'm gonna send to him.
Check that
But
in.
so you mentioned like the heel, right? So we all know we've all heard all of the stories with the U.S. national team beating England. A whole bunch of the guys were from the St. Louis City Hill. Um, so could you tell us a little bit of that experience when you were in St. Louis? Did you get a feel of you know how crazy St. Louis is about soccer?
Yeah, you could for sure. There's a couple restaurants, pubs in that district, and I didn't go to any games, but you would see people in their kit having a couple of drinks and getting ready to go. Um, yeah, I mean the history is insane when you
Did
read
you wear your
about it.
town FC around town, or
I
it
wore,
was
yeah, of
just
course, man. Always got a rep, and yeah, I mean, just you can. I was telling someone the other day, like you can go into some of those old restaurants and you can like feel the history in those places, and you can just imagine, man, these people were 1955, 1965, 75, 85. There's people eating right in this room, and the energy was there. And of course, soccer would be the sport, although I'm sure these were people that supported American football and baseball and other stuff, right? But yeah, when you read about some of the history, it's crazy. And that's why, we talk about like soccer isn't new here, like it's been around. And it's now just with, kind of more ammunition and backing behind it. But yeah, St. Louis was awesome. That was
and you
awesome.
never knew. You may have walked around some of those that are their family members that have played against England and beat them. It's just,
There
and I
was
think that was
there's a house in the hill. There's an old house.
yeah.
It's like I forget, I got the photo somewhere, but there's actually a placard on the sidewalk of one of the players that was involved in that team. And like I hadn't even read about that at that point, right? I just like we were parking. There's this house. Took a photo of it. I'm like looking at the sidewalk. I'm like, Soccer Hall of Fame. I'm like, that's cool. Obviously everyone knows the history of St. Louis and American soccer, but yeah, I mean it's a real tradition there, and a lot of family-owned restaurants, and people that from the old days would have supported soccer, but then to see the fans of St. Louis City that are there, and it was really cool. You could feel the energy for sure, that like it's a club where people really care about it. You'd be driving, in the different parts, the outskirts of the city, and even different places 30 minutes away,
Like,
45 minutes away, and you'll see people flying the flag, the club flag on their front porch. And I think here we have it as well. The Bay Area is, it's kind of, more, not in a bad way, kind of like a transient community. Like people come here, they leave here, it's just, and it's a very diverse cultural spot, and there are very passionate fans of the San Jose Earthquakes here and other clubs, like the town, the Roots, Sac Republic, right? Like people that really love that Monterey Bay. Um, but yeah, it was cool seeing it in St. Louis, where it was just like, wow, we're like 45 minutes outside of St. Louis. I just saw like three houses on this one street that are flying St. Louis City flags.
oh
That's
yes.
that's pretty cool. And the color scheme is dope. And it's just like it's a cool club.
It's different. It's certainly different. So now we invite anyone from the West Coast to come over here and get a taste of it. And I think funny story. I think one of my good friend Faisal Bitashi now plays for the Roots too. I think he's going in for his second year. So it's another fun connection on that part. And then now kind of leading to more of your experience as like the business. Soccer business mind that you are. So we see that now you have the WPSL Pro, right? And you also have working a pathway for girls and women for like a third division team. So, Lee, could you tell us a little bit about that project and where it is and your goals for that third division?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I kind of when I did the Roots, I was just doing that. That was it. All my 100% focus there. And the last couple of years, I've kind of decided to do different things at the same time. And as crazy as that sounds, in some ways it works. You just have to figure out how to kind of compartmentalize and move stuff forward across the day. But like I founded the town, co-founded the town. I have like a consulting business. I work with different youth clubs, and a couple of them I do some other stuff advisory. And then the WPSL Pro came about because Sean Jones, the owner of the WPSL, was the local owner of Rio OKC. That I was like my last coaching stop, working with Alan Marsina and Dario Pot. And Sean was, the local owner. The team played out in Yukon, but was, kind of based in the Oklahoma City market. And he's been, for a number of years now with a couple partners of his, the owner of the WPSL. And the turf that was used at Rio OKC was a modular turf. And when we played at the Roots, we actually used that turf at Laney College. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to play where we played. And I don't think the club exists as it does today, if at all, because there was no venue in Oakland to do this. So it was really like a one in a million that Sean still had it. It was up in Canada somewhere. The Cosmos had used it in the NASL. And so we had reconnected on that, and then just kind of stayed in touch loosely over the years. And when I was putting the town together, there wasn't a pathway for women's soccer. There was, the USL that had their stuff, but we were kind of pursuing the MLS Next Pro, and there's no women's offering from MLS. And so I kind of reached out to Sean and just said, hey, like, what do you think about tier 3 or lower league women's pro soccer? And they'd actually, been working on it prior to the pandemic. And if you think back to like the WPSL elites, in the year between the women's pro soccer league, I forget the name, folding and the NWSL starting, there was like a half season where the WPSL actually formed a professional division and kind of provided a gap prior to the NWSL launching. And so there's a history, and it's a very long running league, over 25 years. I think it's the largest women's league in the world. And it was just the relationship I had with Sean, where it was like, okay, they have a desire to do it. They don't have the bandwidth to pursue it. Why don't we partner on this and move forward and see? And so that was really crazy to like, be a co-founder and a co-owner of a league at the same time. I'm a co-founder and a co-owner of a club. At the same time, I'm doing some other kind of, consulting stuff and, some stuff that just kind of keeps money coming in good ways. Yeah, so that project was a totally different world, right? And I think at the same time, it's always been trying to be built around supporting clubs and making it work for operators. So as an operator of a club, I've lived all the good and the bad, and the idea of trying to make a league that can be sustainable, and not just sustainable from like, let's keep burning cash as a way to sustain it, but like, how do you actually make these things get to break even? It's been fun. It's been fun. There's a much larger group of people now, in a good way, that are involved and have put some really significant financial backing to the league. And there's a lot of clubs around the country, some of which have been members of the WPSL, and they're looking to step up and elevate. Some of whom are MLS Next Pro club owners that are looking for a women's project to kind of add to their men's project. And some are just new people that are just looking to do it and starting from zero. And so I think that kind of collective of people joining the project as time has gone on, puts it at least in a position where it can have a chance to do it. It's got to execute like anybody. And I still think within that, like the if you look at the women's soccer pyramid, there are still some big holes in that pyramid. With, you got NWSL, they're doing their second tier, also, or their lower tier. You've got Super League, which I'm sure at some point is going to build down. You've got WPSL Pro, which is at the kind of foundational level, pro-am, semi-pro, now elevating up. And I still think that there's some gaps in that space, and I don't know if I'm crazy enough to keep trying to plug them. Maybe we'll see.
Hey, well, there's Midwest PL here that has also a women's league in the Midwest that keep adding more teams. So there you have
Yeah,
it, you know?
there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good people, and
Yes.
I think with the WPSL Pro, like I said, there's a whole investment apparatus has been added to the project with some really motivated team owners that are now league investors. Um, and so yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. But it was really cool to gain that perspective of like just and I'd seen it when we were doing the Roots. We were part of the Founders Cup with the NPSL, and we were part of NISA when it launched. And so those clubs were very hands on with those launch processes. And so I wasn't my first time being in the room for that. But it's a whole different beast to make your club work and then to make your league work. Where at the league, it's like you're only as strong as your weakest club.
Right.
And you see it. I mean, you add two teams, you lose one team. You add two teams, you lose one team. And so the question is like, can you can you change that model to where you add two teams and you keep two teams, and then you add two teams and you keep two teams, and and
Yes.
actually not this like spaghetti on the wall type approach. Um, but the cost structures are very tough, and when you start paying people year round and all the things that you should have in a pro environment, right? Like housing and health insurance and food and all the things you
Adds
do,
up.
salary and medical staff and all. It's just it's it's not easy to you can blink and $5 million.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's a sweet spot. I don't want to give away too many trade secrets, but
No,
you know it's a good
absolutely.
time. It's a good time for women's soccer.
Absolutely. So yes, so you mentioned all of the people in the background making things happen, right? And then you have us, the soccer community, the people that have social media and others. So what is one thing that you've loved to see from the community itself and how we can help support, the women's and men's teams, lower leagues team? What is some of the things that you see that we can do on our part to help elevate uh, those leagues, those teams, and the communities around them?
Come out to the games. I mean, that's the key, right? Like these teams at the lower levels, there's not a big TV contract. They're not selling players for crazy amounts of money. So I think it's really and how to make it more than just giving your money to the club. Like you talked about getting, kids out to watch games and the benefit that has on them seeing a full game and being able to take away the lessons of the whole game, not just the clips of the nutmeg or whatever. But coming to games is everything because these clubs live and die on game day economics. Like you've got your ticket sales, you've got your sponsorships, you got your parking concessions, you've got your food and drinks and maybe adult beverages. You've got your merchandise, a huge chunk of which is purchased in the stadium on the day of the game. Um, and that's yeah, you got your sponsorships and other things and non-game day merch and your tryouts and other stuff you can do, but the game day economics of these teams are make or break for their ability to survive. And so I would encourage people go to that Wednesday night game, like find ways to go to all the games, buy season tickets. Um, I know that there's costs and people got to live and people got to work and they got kids and responsibilities and other stuff, but if you're a soccer family, find ways to go watch soccer at your local level. Then, that can be St. Louis City, of course, that's the highest level. Go do it. But there's probably some amateur club, you
Oh,
know, go watch one game a year, or go watch two games a year. Maybe there's three or four amateur clubs. Go watch a couple. Talk to your friends about it, right? Like try to organize people because the more people that go, it's also more fun for the attendees to go, right?
yes.
And build a tradition around it. And maybe you show up early and you tailgate a little bit, or you find ways to make it fun. But I think that for the lower clubs to survive, the game days are everything, and fans just being willing to be like, I'm going to go to all the games, or I'm going to find ways to support the club. I'm going to buy the jersey. I'm going to buy season tickets. I'm going to, again, like you start adding that up and it becomes a decent amount of money to commit to. But
Oh,
that's what
well,
does it.
Yeah, and we do see some of the lower leagues, right? A season ticket for the entire season is like, I think the last one I've saw for our friends is like $150. That's a soccer jersey.
Yeah.
So yes, so I
Yeah,
think
you buy the jersey, you buy the season tickets, you buy a t-shirt, you buy a hat, you buy a scoop. Before you know it, you're like $700 in, and I get that that's a lot to commit,
yeah,
for like an amateur club or a lower level club. Um, but at the same time, there's this moment where like dollars are going into the space, and if fans, can show the revenue and show the interest, it will only accelerate more investment into those spaces. And it doesn't mean that you just want to go give the club your money and like not have a word about how they are and what their values are and what they do. Like, I think there's also an opportunity for local fans to try to have, a voice in the club within reason, because there's got to be autonomy for the business to operate. Um, but yeah, there's still very much this jumping off point. And so I feel the more involved people can be, the better. And again, if that's, hey, I don't want to give those guys my money, well then go organize a couple buddies and make a club, and I think
well, go
that's
support the players.
too,
Yes.
and go build relationships with these young people. And a lot of them are kind of like, as an athlete, you're putting your body out there, you're fatigued, you're tired. There's a lot of like apprehension and anxiety in that, right? There's a lot of vulnerability in that. And so I think for fans to find those ways to connect locally with those players, even the MLS guys,
Yes.
and it just creates that culture, right? And that culture then creates longevity, and whether that guy's there for one season or 2 seasons or 10 seasons, you form that connection. And I'm sure do you see guys from the club like St. Louis City? You see them out and about in the
Um,
community?
I a few. It's probably because my connection might be a little different than everybody else because I do know some of them outside of the club. But I would say maybe the first year was more used to seeing, and I think it was more of like the American kids, like Tim Parker, for example, and Vasilev that had kind of lived in the New York and Midwest area, so they were able to just go outside the town and just people let them enjoy their family time. Go out to eat. You hear people like, "Hey Tim, good game," and then they go walk away. So I think that's one of those things that I hear from players is that when they're live in St. Louis, they can literally go to the grocery store, do their business, come out. They might see a few people do hints, high fives and stuff. Kids, they always go and sit, good, hang out with the kids, take pictures. But the thing that I've heard from probably a dozen players, and even from other cities, that in the US, you can be the professional player in MLS, the top guy, most likely you could go to the school, go play, and you will most likely be left alone compared to if you're in Europe, if you leave your house,
Yeah,
everybody's there.
yeah,
In our club team here, there's 3 or 4 players that have kids that play there, and they're just left alone like normal everyday person.
yeah.
So I think so that's the community building that I do see in the MLS where some of these players can almost live a normal life, even though they're still professional athletes.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. I mean, remember when Thierry Henry and Rafa Marquez were playing for New York Red Bulls? There's those photos of them on the subway and
Yeah,
people just kind of not even knowing who they were. Um,
that's I saw those pictures and I was like, you guys have no idea who you sitting next to. Like no way. But I'm sure now they probably wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, it's madness to think that. And I think they show Hakimi and I forget, maybe Mbappe was in New York City. I think they have a little bit of their face covered, but
yeah,
like no one recognized them
yeah,
except 2 kids that recognized because you can tell some of the features.
yeah.
A small kid had the PSG jersey on him and he recognized them with even the mask. But everybody else in New York City had no clue who they were.
Yeah, that's got
I
to
was
be
like,
special.
yeah, I was like, that's. I think any professional athletes in general would love to live a in quote normal life.
Yeah, that'll be the trick. You gotta find a way to suppress the cultural development just enough to where we can convince these big name guys to come over here and be anonymous for a couple years, you know?
And Mark, it could
Messi,
work.
right? Even Messi, you know, you see these things of Messi like driving his car around Miami or something, and
Yes, I
people
don't see too
not
many good
bothering him,
things.
you know?
I don't see too many things about it, but I think that's one of those cool things where I think when you see people just stop in the light and they see it's Messi and I don't know how they end up having a Argentina jersey in their car.
Just driving around with it on the
Yeah,
off chance that they see him.
and they're like, oh, and so I think it's one of the culture part of soccer. I think here, as long as people find the medium of like fandom and being a normal person, I think that could attract a lot more big name players to smaller towns. I mean, you can come to St. Louis. I'm pretty sure if even if Thierry Henry will probably be left alone as much.
Yeah.
Maybe not by the kids, but
And they're just normal. They're normal people too. I think that's the
yeah,
other thing. Is like they're normal. You know, they
that's
live the same way we do. They're humans, right?
yeah,
And so I feel like that's probably in a good way. Um, you know, global football is amazing.
yes,
Some of the fan support is in some ways almost like an ailment. You know what I mean? Like the club is going like you're saying, the club's going bad. They have a bad game. Can't go to the grocery store, especially for the manager.
yes,
You know, it's like different, right? Like, yeah, I get that. Like, it just is what it is. Like, it's cool actually that it's like that important. But I feel it's also cool here that like, you know, some guy can have a crap game and he doesn't have to worry about getting like yelled at walking through the mall with his kids 2 days later. You know what I mean? Or
yes,
if it happens, there's maybe like one guy that's gonna like be the asshole to say, "Hey, you suck," you know, like. Whereas if you go to, you know, some places around the world, you know,
a few people disappear for a lot less.
yeah,
Yes,
people might, you know, throw something at them or curse,
yeah,
you know, it's just a different. So I feel that that's in some ways good that it's not like completely a mental illness with some of the fan support, you know, or
oh,
they can keep it in perspective of like, hey, I'm a fan, but then that just like there's a line here that I'm like not gonna cross. I'm not
yes,
gonna go to
those,
become like the crazy obsessed fan hiding in the bushes, you know, like and even in the I mean, NBA, NFL, I think our culture is kind of like will respect those boundaries a little bit different. You know, of course, the big stars and the big sports, like they gotta. Even Messi has that bodyguard that just goes everywhere with him. Right? But
yeah, I wouldn't mess with that one.
yeah,
Yes,
but Tim Parker, you know, the Tim Parkers of the world, they can go out to dinner and have a good time. So that's a good thing.
yes, and he can manage himself. He's big enough. But
Yeah,
uh,
for sure.
and yes, and the other part of you as well is the entrepreneur, right? So you did the club as well, but now you have Maestro Soccer Company where you have Soccer Spot. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about those two initiatives?
Yeah, so well, really, Maestro, like all my deals to date, I've always done as an individual, you know. So instead of having like an LLC that I, you know, have my ownership interest in or have my compensation come through. So I think as I've kind of like moved along, I wanted to have like a vehicle to be able to either take my ownership stakes that I have in a few different projects, you know, some of which on paper, you know, they're not like liquid, but some of which on paper are, you know, valuable. You know, you add all those up and hopefully I haven't completely thrown away the last 10 years. but
You've
you
done
know,
a great job. Yes.
so to have that and you know, you can like assign them to like a company that you own. So to have that, like to kind of put that in one spot. And then for some of the ongoing work that I do, consulting, to just kind of have the benefits of putting that into a company versus myself as an individual. So that was what kind of created Maestro. I gave it a name, Maestro Soccer Co.
I like it.
It kind of rings, you know, it's not bad. So I'll build that out as a brand. Um, and the soccer spot was originally just like an idea of doing a gym, like a soccer gym, and then it's just kind of been like what I have used for some of the consulting that I've done because it's its own company. Um, but like the Legends Tour as an example, like
Uh,
that's owned by Maestro. That's going to be, that's a Maestro company, which is its own entity within Maestro. But, everyone's seen TST. Everybody's seen the Savannah Bananas.
yes.
Everyone's been thinking, like, how do you take Savannah Bananas and TST and 11v11 and put it together? So the Legends Tour, I'm really excited about.
So am
I guess
I.
this could be the forum where we can announce St. Louis as one of the test markets, but it'll
Hey,
have to be a thing. It'll have to. A buddy of mine actually that I really trust his opinion, and I won't give him away, but he's a senior executive in one of the professional leagues, and he was talking about how St. Louis he thinks would be like a great market, and so
I might be a little biased, but he's 110% right.
I think so. I think so. We'll find there's like a little school field in the hill where like they have like a almost like a kickball wall that's like painted with the Italian flag colors. I forget the name of
Yes.
the school. We'll go do it there. We'll go do a game at the hill.
There's plenty of San Luis is crazy enough.
There's
We have
spots.
fields from everywhere. You
Yeah.
just blink and you'll find one.
But yes, so Maestro is just like the company within which I do my projects now. And like, that's actually like, just a recent thing. The Legends Tour is as I mentioned, a company of that or a program of that. um my take on it, and we'll see if it's successful or not. Like I gotta do it. I have some people that I'm like, it's kind of in stealth mode right now, but and like the town is still active and our women's project is still going and our pathway to independent pro soccer, we're still doing that. We have our academy program that plays in MLS next. Really talented teams. Like there's a bunch, there's a whole universe there that I'm really excited about, and I think we have an ability to really become um, a player in the U.S. club space. But the Legends Tour is it's either 77 or 99. I think there's kind of two legends, right? There's like the local legends, like the Sunday League legends, and they have their own community, they have their own following. You get 20 of the top local guys, and they each bring 50 people from their circle, and right there is 1,000 people that will come watch them play if there's a motive, like a reason to get them to show up.
Right.
And so for the Sunday leagues, they don't really do that because it's not like a big thing, but they're big people in their little circle. So imagine if you took a collection of those local legends and you matched them up against retired legends. And you see it with the Mexican clubs. They have all these legends teams that
Yes.
travel and they go play these games, and fans want to see what these guys look like. They just want to, hey, this guy's 40. Does he still have it? You know, is he
I swear
50? Is
that
he 50 pounds overweight? Like, what's he? I'll pay the money just to go see, right? And like, I want to support my club, and so there's
watch
like
Ronaldinho and he'll show you how he still have a belly, but he still got it.
he still got it, right? But people, so there's that component of legends.
Yes.
And then there's like just the guys that played long career in MLS or USL that I think are recognizable and respectable, and level up the competition. Um, and then you've got your kind of big name guys. I'm fortunate in that I do have some touch points into some agents in Europe that have that represent some big clients and are part of big agencies. That stuff is a little tricky, getting them over
Right.
here.
Yes.
They come on a tourist visa, but then they're working. You want to respect immigration laws and not do anything bad. But there are um, some touch points there. And then I've got some connections into some of the organizers or the people that work with these Mexican clubs to organize these games. And I just know a lot of guys that played MLS, USL. And so I'm kind of like, again, in stealth, but I feel excited about putting together like the local legends and having them then compete against the non-local legends and putting it in a 7v7 format where again you think about like and TST they pioneered this, but just we back in the day you go play 7v7 tournaments, you just put two fields across and you put two fields in one 11v11, and
And
all TST did was just put fans in the stands and put those cabana tents on one sideline, and So you can see in a 11v11 stadium how you can modify the footprint to fit. But if you think about like minor league baseball, the challenge with baseball is that to put grass on the infield to play a game is really expensive. It can be
Yeah.
$60,000 to $100,000 just to convert a field, which is crazy. You do that over 20 games. That's a lot
It's
of
a
money
rough
just
one. Yeah.
just to make the field work, right? And then it's like grass. It's not even real. It's real grass, but it's different colored and it can come up and it doesn't play well and all the stuff that you can
And
see
it's
from
gone very
distance.
quickly. Yes.
Right, gone, and so there's that. But it's like, well, what if you found a footprint that could fit in the outfield of a baseball stadium
That
and you can just put it in, and all of a sudden you've got this amazing facility, and they've got fans, and they would love to market soccer, but they don't want to, pay $60,000 to organize, Chivas U23s or the Chivas Legends to come play at their stadium because by the time they pay the field conversion, they're already not going to get profitable on
pay
that
out.
game, right? And
Yes.
they don't want to lose money. So if you can, for me, the Legends Tour will be that. It will be designed to go in 11v11 fields in a modified footprint or go into baseball outfields and fit it to the dimensions of the field. And then you've got the, bleachers in the outfield. You've got the, first baseline or third baseline bleachers, at least in that part of the stadium. And then you've got the ability to put those same tents and cabanas around the field level,
All right.
and even below the outfield bleachers, right? Because you're going to have a wall, right, to where the home run ball would come out. So there's, I think, an interesting dynamic there as well, and modify the rules, change it up a little bit, find some creative ways to do it, add some live entertainment to it, add a little bit of one of my buddies runs an entertainment company. He refers to it as edutainment, not entertainment, but edutainment.
Okay.
Um, so like you kind of coin that term, you apply that to soccer, um, and then just check it out and see. So we're gonna do some test games early in this year, with some stuff we'll be able to announce soon. And
Just
yeah,
just break it here. At a later
St. Louis,
time.
St. Louis,
Yeah.
this is official now. This is one of the
Hey, we
marquees.
we I can just on top of my head can tell you almost four locations where there's plenty of space to have a full-blown tournament in one location.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
so exactly. And even if you think about it, right, like the same thing, uh, you can go to a pre-existing club. What I like about this type of stuff and, the league stuff, I've spent time with the leagues,
Right.
WPSL Pro as an example, and being an operator of teams and other leagues. And it's so, and rightfully so, it's so structured. There's so many things you got to do. It's professional, right? So
Right.
it's got to meet all these metrics. With this stuff, you and me could figure out how to go do a pop-up event in St. Louis.
Yeah.
We don't have to be sanctioned. There's no ownership requirements. You got to have the money to get the guys to show up, and you got
Right.
to figure out how to market it and promote it. But I feel like there's an opportunity for individual entrepreneurs in their own market, their own community, to say, "Hey, I want to do something cool." And then for my ability to connect with those people, and then on the player side be able to bring that to the field, be able to work with them on the local player side, right? Because they're in community, their knowledge of like the people to talk to and the places to go, and all that stuff is, I'm really excited about it from that perspective, and I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential, um, where you'll be able to get, if we do it the right way, a couple thousand people out to these games. Um, and if you do it in the right setting in a smaller venue or whatever, it can feel like a 20,000 person event, and make it fun, like what Savannah Bananas have done, right? And not
Yeah.
make it like there will be no live singing in the game. I promise that there will be like none of that,
Yes.
none of that, but to kind of capture that spirit of like trying to do stuff and outside the box things and still respecting the game and making it represent soccer. It's got to look like soccer. Um, yeah, I'm excited about that. So that's kind of like, amongst a bunch of other stuff
That you're
that I'm
working on.
active with that we could go on. I kind of like that. When I was a kid, I would read like 6 or 7 books at the same time, and that's just always how I've been, and so it's
Keeps
yeah,
it young.
any excuse to come back to the hill, right? I'm looking forward to
There
that.
you go. Yeah,
Sometime in 2026, we'll be in St. Louis in the days leading up to this event, and hopefully it won't be too stressful. But we'll find a good spot to eat, and we'll have some drinks, and we'll get through it somehow. We'll close our eyes a little bit and just let it go.
yeah,
I'm looking
yeah. I
forward.
think just and to pretty much close out that discussion, I think one part that you mentioned I kind of like is that bringing like small communities and making sure that the community itself is involved in those events. And that's pretty much kind of like the, trickle effect, right? Where it shows the excitement of that tournament here. Then after that, it leads more to kids talking about it, parents talking about it. It's like, hey, then we have a minor league, which is Midwest PL, that plays all of the high school, college kids locally. Now we have the pros. Then they go to St. Louis City. So it's opening more avenues to watch entertainment soccer, but also professional soccer, and watch
Yeah.
some of those people that you've seen growing up. See your older brother, older sister
Yeah.
play the sport.
In the Bay Area, like one of my friends, he's the friend of many people, but my buddy Baba is like, very much a organizer in the Nigerian community.
I
You
think I
know,
saw your LinkedIn conversation not long ago with him.
yeah, right, and great guy, and he used to be involved with this thing called the Emoji Festival, where it was organized by different people, but he would do a soccer tournament at the Emoji Festival. So I can think about that. Like I have a lot of friends that there's a lot of Afghanis that have come to the Bay Area, and a lot of these guys I got to know through soccer, playing with them or being around them. And they have these tournaments. They have them nationally, but they would organize a couple in the Bay Area. They'd get like 1,000+ people to come out to watch these guys play. I have some friends in the Yemenis community, also in Oakland, and they've got their one or two guys, right, that are like the best of that group. So you go get a couple of the Nigerians, and you go get a couple of the Yemenis guys, you go get a couple of the Afghan guys, go get a couple of these other groups. You put those guys together in, a group of 20+ people, and then you have them play against like Chivas legends with some retired guys, and then maybe you add one or two guest players that are like, not related to Chivas but are bigger name guys, not to say Ronaldinho, but like, someone that's a
You
recognizable
never
name,
know.
and you put that all together, and then you've got that local community where they're all there to like see their person or their couple guys. And then you've got the club. Oh, we're gonna go watch Chivas because it's Chivas. And then you've got the outside guys, and you put that in the right environment. I feel like you could have a really electric atmosphere, and
Yes.
then find a way to monetize it in a way that's not going to price people out. But now you're selling a ticket. Now you've got your food. Maybe you partner with some of those local, you know, the Afghan food vendor and the Nigerian. You bring some different flavor to the game. You tap into some music from those communities, and you can just make it very without a lot of like overthinking it.
I,
That's the vision, at least. We'll see.
I
We'll
like
see
it.
how it executes, but
But yes, so those of you that are watching this later on, now if we you know what's happening, so you won't be surprised when you see it. And there's a certain group that he's wearing a hat that if anything happens in St. Louis, they will have to help provide some of that food because I think
for sure.
if they say no, I'm sure you probably won't come to St. Louis because yeah, they have to help. So, but
Yeah.
that's a whole nother discussion. And 2026 is going to be one of those great years. It's not just World Cup; it's also a lot more. So, with that said, now I have five fire questions for you to close out this show. So, I guess the biggest question is: you ready for those five questions?
Let's go. I make no promises, but I'll do my best.
All right, all right. So the first one is: what's the best environment you've ever been in player development? And what was it? And what made it so great?
Dinamo Zagreb, hands down. Um, it was great because it was the best of the best, and that just created its own level. And from the coaching as well, like very talented individuals that were educators and experts in their domain. If they were working with the U8s, U9s, that was their focus. They weren't guys that would go up like you see here, take a team for 6 years. They were just to that age group, and that was it. Um, and so I think it was, yeah, it was the best of the best, and there was support and purpose and intention, and then also just a very cutthroat environment, which, as bad as that sounds, is a key component to high achievement. Um,
Uh,
and so yeah, Dinamo Zagreb, hands down, that was like, and they could play with anybody. They could, as an academy, could play with anybody in the world. Um, and it's hard to separate all those things, but the best of the best, from coaches to players, and with resources and support, not a lot because it's Croatia, so there's like a lot of poverty, and not, you know, wasn't like you just had everything you needed. But I think that's also good to a certain extent. And then just like sink or swim. So yeah,
yeah.
that would be my first answer.
And I can, from history and especially me as a French person, Croatia has been a pain in our butts when it comes to soccer for a lot of time. So I totally understand, how they've been built since '98. Pretty much, always have seen. We've always played them in the World Cup for some reason, in finals or non-finals. So I totally understand that grit you're referring to when it comes to Croatians.
Yeah.
And so, what was the most powerful soccer moment you've ever experienced that had nothing to do with the score line?
Uh, my whole life.
That one always gets people when it's not the
Yeah, well, it's
score
like the
line.
best. There's like so many I could try to pick from that didn't have to do with the scoreline. Um, I mean, I'll go with the Town FC. I mean, I have a lot of memories. I have a
Right.
lot of things I could point to. Uh, Town FC. This was maybe in May of 2 years ago. We were playing LAFC 2 in May. Big crowd. Several thousand people at our venue in St. Mary's where we used to play. And I posted on my LinkedIn. I'll send you the video later. I just took on my camera, like, very electric atmosphere, but like families, a lot of families. That was really our demographic, has been our demographic. And so I took this camera and I'm like walking through the stadium, just kind of filming as I go. And, you see all these kids running around in the camera shot and people standing in line for food. You could really get a sense of the atmosphere. It was very electric. It was like being at a festival, like a carnival. It was really, really cool. And there's a redwood grove next to the field that's connected in the stadium. So it's like there's a redwood grove inside the stadium, and the
Nice.
kids would go play in there and stuff. So I'm like walking all the way to the back to the redwood grove, and I see these kids, and they're just playing with sticks, and they've got the trash can upside down, and they're just banging on this thing like a drum. This kid's maybe like 5 years old, and there's like three or four of these kids, and their parents are like not with them, but it was like this huge park atmosphere that we have, or that we had there, because we're not playing there anymore. But um, yeah, it was like just really, really cool to be like, man, this 5-year-old kid, this guy's parents brought him and his friends to this game. The parents are off doing something else, food, whatever, but it's safe. They feel safe enough to let these kids at least be like 30 yards away from them. And here are these kids. There's like a game going on. There's like several thousand people here, and this kid and his buddies are like, they just picked up sticks off the ground and they're banging on a trash can, and having the best
Future
time of their
drums.
life. Best time of their life. You know what I mean? So that was like really cool to just be like, wow, this is what I'm trying to do. So that's for sure my best memory that had nothing to do with the game itself.
Excellent, excellent. So if you had to choose for the next 5 years, um, only to coach a team, only to build a new club or project, or you will only run your training and business platform with your best friend?
Build a club
Yeah,
for
club.
sure. Yeah,
So it
build a
looks like
club.
now you'll become a serial club builder.
Well, the
Is that
town, we'll continue the next 5 years for the
okay?
town for our group. Um, was going to be great. Um, I think now, yeah, it's interesting. Like build a club, buy a club, like there's like that dynamic. But being in club development,
Okay.
I really love it. But my answer for sure, my real answer would be I'm going to do all of them.
Well,
But the
we've
coaching
gathered.
part, maybe not the coaching part is tough. That's where it's like, I've had some opportunities to like go back towards that route, and I just, I'm not ready for that. But you can't escape it. That's the only challenge about committing to something like even at the youth level. Um, it's like time travel. You got your trainings locked in, you got your games, you have this, you have that. Like you can't navigate the other stuff in the same way. So definitely won't be coaching. Um, but club building and then just entrepreneurial stuff like finding opportunities to kind of do well by doing good.
Yeah.
In the business, like definitely the next 5 years.
Excellent. And so for the next kid that wants to be, a professional player or entrepreneur, what would be one habit that you would kind of want them to horn on as they go to their pathway to reach their goal? One good
Persist.
habit.
Yeah, I would just say resilience and persistence on the mental side. That and for the top level, like learning how to play injured is probably,
Oh,
being able to be resilient to that as well. Yeah, I think like look at a certain level, everybody's good.
yeah.
You know, they're good. They're great at a couple of things, and they're good at other things. And you've only got so many athletes or people that are just so talented that they can just do what they want to do regardless. And even Ronaldinho, right? Like he had a couple years where he was unreal, but then like he wanted the party too much and it messed him up. And like even he wasn't immune to excess partying and alcohol and all the stuff that he was doing. Um, so I think for me, it's like the kid has to be mentally strong to be able to go through the ups and downs, go through the uncertainty, go through the selection process, being selected, not being selected, still finding a way to move forward and improve. And if, like Max Arston, the kid that plays at Columbus Crew now, national team player. Like I remember working with Max when he was 14. He was a baller. He was freaking good. He could dribble you in a phone booth
Yeah.
type of kid.
Nice.
And he played up. And you think about him, right? Like was in the Central Valley. Soccer's really good there, but it wasn't like he played for like the biggest club in USU soccer. He didn't even play in a pro academy. He went to UC Davis, played in college. Then he got drafted, was with the Quakes, with Quakes 2,
Oh,
played MLS Next Pro, found his way to Columbus, made the first team. Boom, now he's in the national team. It was kind of a bummer that he wasn't able to make the move overseas to Europe in the last season, but I'm sure his new contract is paying him really good money and he's got a long-term deal and it's fine. He's still relatively young enough where he could maybe go there later, although it's probably harder for him to really, hit the top level. Um, but we'll see. Maybe he has a great World Cup and now that price goes up and the club's willing to sell him and it could still work out for him. But if you think about just his path, um, it wasn't like the most conventional, like, oh, he was with the Colorado Rapids from U12 to first team and then, got sold to this club in Europe. And now, like he had to kind of find his way. And so I think the resilience factor to just keep moving forward is key. And then that ability to like, play through setbacks and play through injuries and find ways to still move forward even when it's not going your way. That's a key component to success in life. Um, so yeah, that would be is the mental side of the game, and without overthinking that, even just get on with it. Just get on with it, make the best of it.
yes. And the last one. So, how's your feeling about this upcoming World Cup?
I think based on the draw, we should get through the group. You know, After that, I don't think
It's
we're
the World
winning.
Cup.
I don't think we're gonna win the World Cup. I hope they don't. I
Right.
hope it's. I hope it goes well. Like uh, it's a good group of players. There's been a lot of hype around them for a long time. I think they've got to be motivated to like show people, uh, and they have to. This is their moment. They probably get one more cycle, but still, right? Like it's still this is a big moment, and the coaching staff has been here long enough now to be fully aware of who they have and what the good and the bad of everybody in the team is. So in terms of getting the tactics right, there's no excuse. Um, the fans are
Right.
going to be they're going to be bringing it. There's going to be like a lot of pressure around those games, which is cool.
It's at home.
Yeah, hopefully it goes well. Like I'm happy to just be like a cheerleader from the sidelines. Um, and I just think in general, just having it here and having the event here is going to be great. Tickets are crazy expensive, but hopefully people can get to games, and see it. And yeah, I think it's a moment where we can kind of say like soccer has arrived here. And so my hope is that it continues to trickle down to the lower levels and inspires more people to start clubs or inspires more qualified investors to join projects. Inspires leagues to work not harder but work in new ways to try to find more value and bring more value, deliver more value, and inspires players to reach for the highest level and for coaches to say, yeah, I want to be that guy. And you already see that. I think there's already a lot of that over the last couple of years, and hopefully we don't get embarrassed. Hopefully we embarrass some people, but I think we should get through the group, right? I think that's like, and that's for sure like still not an acceptable outcome, right? So it's got to probably be like last 16, which means we're gonna have to
So,
win, out of the group stage. So knock on wood.
yeah, that's usually about what most hosting countries are expected to do at least is get to the 16 quarters. So at least that they're
Yeah,
out of. Yes.
if we can get to the last eight, that would, to me,
Yeah.
like that'd be phenomenal. And again, anything can happen.
It's the World Cup, so yes.
Greece won the Euros on defending and set pieces. It
Yeah.
was a long time ago, but they did it. I remember. So
Yeah. No one remembers how they won it. At the end, is that they were European champion. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
So
remember
yes,
that.
so Bill, definitely appreciate your time, especially your history. From grassroots soccer all the way to the pros, having your own teams, having 10,000 projects at once, and especially youth development because I think that's the biggest piece that we have, and you have a huge um, involvement on that, especially with the Town FC and others. So with that say, do you have any shout outs that you want to let the people know? I know the wifey has to see you go all over the place and now you have a kid, so this is your time to, you know, let the people know.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, um, all the people that you connect with and work with along the way, like my co-founders with the town, Ella Johnson, Tennyson Wilson, a bunch of other folks behind the scenes, some of our investors, our board members that are active. Um, that's just been a lot of fun seeing guys that we've worked with that have gone on to now, work full time in different roles in different clubs. And so I'm just grateful for the people that I've, been able to connect with along the way. And you kind of build like a family around that. So yeah, so I think it's something where it's like, I'm just one person. I bring what I bring to the table, and I think it's good. I hope it's good. But these are things that, wouldn't be possible without support. My wife, my dad's been super hands-on with the town as an example, and wouldn't be possible without him. And just a lot of the good people you meet along the way. I think for myself, I'm just grateful, grateful to have community in the game. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a lot more exciting stuff in front of me. And Yeah, man. See you in St. Louis sometime soon, right?
Like say you have a seat available to you, whatever you just said, who's out in town, we make it happen.
We'll make it happen for sure. I'm
Yes.
gonna I'm gonna hit you up about that. Legends Tour St. Louis is definitely a thing.
We have plenty of them from college to pros. Maybe I'm biased again, but yes, we're loaded.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Likewise, I thank you everyone for joining another episode of Mill Football, Grassroots to the Pros. And make sure you like, subscribe, do all of that YouTube stuff that happens. But with that said, we'll see you soon. And St. Louis is playing February 21st for those that are counting. So it's going to be an exciting time for everyone. And maybe I will find my way sometime in California.
Let's hope so.